This is the Stock Day Podcast, sponsored by Ion Digital, providing secure, compliant ecosystems you can trust. That's Ion Digital. Subscribe to us on iTunes and YouTube to stay up to date on penny stock news and interviews. Public information on OTC, pink sheets, and microcap stocks from around the world. Here's your host, Everett Jolly.
On today's show, I'm bringing back a returning guest. It's been a little while. Last time he was on the show was back in November of last year. And I'm talking about no other than PSYC Corporation. They trade on the OTC markets under the ticker symbol PSYC. The past 30 days, the stock has been getting a lot of traction, and the stock price has been moving up. Here to bring us up to date and tell us more about his company is the CEO, Mr. David Flores. David, welcome back to the show.
Great to be back, Everett. Thanks for having me.
Hey, tell us a little bit about the growth and evolution of the company's flagship media platform, Psychedelic Spotlight, and the importance behind developing it into a premier authority for the psychedelics industry.
Yeah, most definitely. So I want to take some time to really help, folks out there understand what we mean by establishing Psychedelic Spotlight into a media authority here for the psychedelic space. We use that term a lot, but unless, people are plugged into the world of multimedia or the psychedelic space, it may be, challenging to understand where the value and where the potential really lies here in this. So every market sector, whether it's sports, news, pop culture, what have you, typically has one, two, sometimes more media platforms that are regarded as the preeminent authorities within those specific markets.
Right.
For example,
I agree.
ESPN. News has Fox and CNN, pop culture has BuzzFeed, and cannabis has Weedmaps and Leafly. And so, those become the platforms that people tend to go to for news, information, and resources surrounding those respective market sectors. And so when we launched Psychedelic Spotlight 2.5 years ago, we had a very clear objective of building it into the preeminent authority for all things psychedelics. We saw a very unique opportunity in getting in the space very early on to plant our flag in the sand, if you will, and really start to build Psychedelic Spotlight into that media authority for the growing psychedelics industry. And so where the value lies in all of that, so people understand, is when you are that authority and when you are that large platform, what you typically have is you typically have millions of people coming to your site on a weekly and in some instances, a daily basis. And there's a lot of value to that. And because what that allows these platforms to do, it allows them to charge premium pricing for advertisement space on their sites, as well as sponsorship opportunities and just other business-related opportunities for brands and companies that want to get their name out there and in front of potential consumers and in front of people that are going to be interested in their products or their services. And so let's take Leafly, for example. For folks that aren't familiar with it, Leafly, it's a website focused on the cannabis space. It's leafly.com. Now, they got involved in the cannabis space very early on, and they've established themselves into one of the recognized authorities for all things cannabis. When we launched Psychedelic Spotlight, we looked at the fundamentals that had made Leafly as successful as they have, and said, we can take some of that and replicate that with what we're building out here for Psychedelic Spotlight. Now, to give you an example, in 2021, Leafly reported revenue earnings roughly $33 million. So,
wow.
Savvy, right? Not
no.
For a media company. Now, I'm not out here saying that, here in the next year or 2 years, we're going to be generating $33 million. But what I will say is, are we using that as an objective, as a goal that we think we can reasonably achieve here with Psychedelic Spotlight? Absolutely. Now, the way Leafly has done that so successfully is they've been able to drive traffic to their site because people know if they're looking for information, news, or resources related to cannabis, Leafly is one of the top 2 sites that people go to. And so having that traffic coming into their site on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, so on and so forth, allows them to charge premium pricing for advertising space on their site, as well as sponsorships and just having brands and companies in the cannabis space, dispensaries and what have you, paying to be listed on Leafly. So a lot of those fundamentals have been what we've been working into Psychedelic Spotlight here over the last 2.5 years. And to give us an understanding kind of where we stand right now, what my team and I did a few weeks ago is we ran a competitive analysis report to give us a very clear understanding of where Psychedelic Spotlight ranks based on metrics in comparison to our top competitors in the space. And so it's very clear who our competitors are. Double blind, microdose, psychedelics today, and third wave are regarded as our top competitors, as media platforms that are focused exclusively on the psychedelic space. Now, what this competitive analysis demonstrated was the Psychedelic Spotlight has got a pretty strong foothold here on the third spot in terms of ranking. And this is based on metrics. And what I mean by the metrics is we're looking at things like page views, visits to the site daily, weekly, monthly. But we're also looking at how long people are spending on the website, because that's very important information as well. It's one thing to have people coming to your site and then just leaving, but you want people to come, you want people to engage with your content, to be able to explore and find new content, because that just builds more value. And what we're finding is people are actually staying on Psychedelic Spotlight for close to 3 minutes. And so this is important for us, because what this is all demonstrating is that a lot of these strategies that we sort of laid out, 2 years ago, a year ago, are all starting to bear fruit. It's all starting to pay off now, and it's demonstrating that we have Psychedelic Spotlight on a very viable path here to becoming that preeminent authority within the psychedelics space. So this has been very exciting for us, because again, it demonstrates that we're moving in the direction that we've intended to move in. And again, so when we sit here and we talk to people and tell them, okay, well, where's the value in PSYC as a media company? Well, it is becoming that preeminent media authority and leader for the psychedelic space. And we now have metrics and data to demonstrate that we're doing that we're actually following through with the objectives that we've laid out. So again, Everett, I think this is important, because I think a lot of people out there are still, wondering, okay, well, where is the value here? How is Psychedelic Spotlight and PSYC Corp going to monetize? And this is it. We're starting to see it come together. So the fundamentals are there, and we're moving in the right direction.
On 2022 was a very challenging year, not only for this sector, for a lot of other sectors, especially psychedelics sectors, seem to be hit pretty hard. That being said, what in mind, how did the company navigate through the challenges of last year? And where do you think your perspective for this psychedelic sector can go to? Like you said earlier, there's one company out there, Leaf is doing $33 million. Why are people coming there? What are you offering? What are you seeing that you guys are going to have to do in the next 2 or 3 quarters to start gaining scalability, if you will?
Yeah, most definitely. That's a great question. So yeah, last year, 2022 was a challenging year for the psychedelic space. It got hit particularly hard. As we know, the markets in general went through a tough time last year. And so what a lot of 2022 was for the psychedelic space was a lot of, I like to refer to them as FOMO investors, a lot of people that just got in 2020 and early 2021 simply because they thought, oh, this is the next big thing, and I'm going to be able to make a return on this quickly. And then they realized in 2022 that that's just not the case. Yes, there's still a ton of potential here, but you have to understand, this space is highly dependent. This space, I mean specifically the psychedelic space, is highly dependent on the drug development side of things actually coming to fruition. And these psychedelic-related drugs and medicines that are running through clinical trials right now actually achieving approval from the FDA. That requires a process. I don't care what drug you're developing. It's going to go through a clinical trial process, and that process can only move as fast as it can. So as a lot of people started to realize this and realize, okay, this space is really still 2, maybe 3 years away from really being able to start to pick up traction by way of seeing the FDA approve certain, psychedelic drugs that some of these biotech companies are working on, they all jumped out and they all went to crypto and EV and whatever. And, I'm not gonna knock anybody for their decisions. But listen, what we have left here now is an environment here in the psychedelic space where the majority of people that are still invested in the space are in it for the long haul. These are the investors that understand the nature of the business and understand the challenges that still need to be worked through. But they realize and they recognize that it's moving in the right direction. I mean, for example, we just look around us. Australia a few weeks ago announced that they're legalizing MDMA and magic mushrooms for medical use. We know the state of Colorado, legalized, a psychedelic therapy program very similar to what Oregon legalized in 2020. The changes are happening all around us, and there's still multiple biotech companies right now that are pouring millions of dollars into these clinical trials for these psychedelic-related drugs. So the progress is being made. It's still moving in a very positive direction. And so for us, it's just having to survive. And so, what we did part of last year was we diversified our media assets because we recognized that a lot of the biotech companies and companies in the psychedelic space simply weren't spending money on media last year. And so rather than just sitting on our hands waiting for the space to kind of correct itself and come back around, we went out, we diversified our media assets, brought in Technical 420, which focuses on the cannabis space. Companies in cannabis are still spending money on media by and large, and also on the bids, which focuses on the mining and precious metal sector. And that is a very hot sector and a sector where companies are spending money. So that's given us a revenue flow that we need while we still build things out here on the psychedelic side. Because I'm going to make this perfectly clear, Everett. At the end of the day, we are a psychedelics media company. And our end goal and our end objective is to be the number one media authority for all things psychedelics. But it would be naive for us to sit here and think that in this very early stage of this industry's development that we can monetize, that we can build a sustainable revenue model. We need to wait. It's going to happen. It's going to come. And as I mentioned earlier, we're laying the foundation for all of that to happen. But in the meantime, bringing in these diversified media assets to give us that revenue flow so that we've got what we need to keep going and keep moving forward has been so critical for us. So at the end of the day, I'm still incredibly bullish on the psychedelic space. Yes, I might be biased because we are a psychedelics media company, but I'm also someone that spends a lot of time immersed in this space, talking to other leaders, talking to advocates, and really paying attention to what's happening. And all that still leads me to believe this industry is going to get where it needs to go. It's taking time, but it's happening. And so with that, I'm still very, very optimistic on the true long-term potential that I believe we're going to be able to deliver here to PSYC and to all of our shareholders, especially those shareholders that have been able to stick with us through this journey so far.
You've been listening to David Flores. He is the CEO of PSYC Corp. You can find him on the OTCPINKs under the ticker symbol PSYC. Got about 20 seconds left here. David, I'm going to give you the last word. What is it that you want my listeners, your stockholders, to take away from today's conversation?
I say it on Twitter all the time. I use the hashtag trust the process. And that's what we've done. And that's what we've continued to do. And now we have metrics to demonstrate that process that I speak of is working. So, when we launched this thing 2.5 years ago, I know a lot of people thought that it was pie in the sky, talking about building Psychedelic Spotlight into the biggest media company in the psychedelic space. Well, we've got metrics now to demonstrate that we're moving in that direction and that is a very realistic goal that we have an opportunity to accomplish. So if you follow the story, follow the process, you'll see that the progress is being made and we're moving in the exact direction that since day one we said we were going to move in. So I think if anything else, that's what I'd like to leave people with.
David, thank you so much for coming on the show. Hopefully you come back in 40 or 50 days and give us an update.
I would absolutely love that, Everett. Thank you so much.
This program is entirely sponsored and produced by La Jolla Media, LLC, which is responsible for the content. The opinions and information provided on this program are for educational and research purposes. Stock Day encourages all listeners of this program to do their due diligence and research when determining investment strategies that will work for them, or to seek the assistance of an investment professional.